The interest rate is possible to support at the 6%, 6.5% level perhaps. If we have to pay the industrial rates of 9.5%, I don't see how they can be sustained. If we do receive federal grants for the difference in interest cost at the airport level, then perhaps all we'll suffer is somewhat increased costs. But those costs are substantial in any case, and we hope that this bill doesn't pass. I haven't any strong reaction to a statement by one of the best friends I have. If that's his opinion, I respect his right to disagree. But I really think an inadvertent remark was picked up and magnified out of proportion. John Stemmons is a person who knows very well that we'll take bids on what we are contemplating doing, and if the bids are proper, if they represent values and the values are greater than the cost, we'll do them. If they are less, we'll do something else. But it's useless to speculate until we have these bids and know what our situation is. That'll be about the middle of November.
Speaking as one of the boys in the back room, as Paul seems fond of calling us, I'd like to say a thing or two about his comments. First of all, I think nearly all newsmen agree that the network newsrooms are basically New York-oriented. After all, they are located in New York. They're staffed by people largely from Oklahoma City and Omaha and New Orleans and such, but they are located in the big city, and they tend to hew to those standards. I, as a local editor, have been heard to say that New York editors tend to use the New York Times as the sole guide for what's news and what isn't. Nevertheless, the wire services are hardly any less centralized. Many of their stories are filed by member newspapers and radio and television stations around the land, but their basic coverage of politics and government comes from their own staff, and they are located in Washington and New York, just like the networks. At any rate, I cannot agree with Paul that he personally is America's last and aging defense against a liberal blackout of conservative views in the United States. In fact, it seems the conservatives may be winning. Richard Nixon is, after all, president. Now, he's no Barry Goldwater and certainly no George Wallace, but he's no Lyndon Johnson or Hubert Humphrey or Gene McCarthy either. And getting to the network commentators, Isn't it interesting how Howard K. Smith has suddenly become a hawk on Vietnam, while Paul Harvey himself is urging unilateral withdrawal? Not necessarily along liberal conservative lines, but downright interesting, isn't it? Concerning the demands for equal time, certainly the public should hear both sides of every question. Broadcasting is in that business, and if you think you're hearing only one side, we'd be happy to receive your request for equal time. I'm sure the FCC would be happy to receive it too. I guess in looking at Paul's comments then, we would agree when he says that New York newsmen are basically New York-oriented. We would agree when he would say that all television stations should air both sides of every question and may not be doing so now. But when he suggests that all of broadcast news is uniformly and perhaps even conspiratorially liberal, except for his one solitary voice, nope. This is Travis Linn.
Did you ever think you were going to die in that Korean prison?
When I was first captured, yes. And again, later on, after many months in prison, I thought maybe we might be staying there for many years, just dying slowly.
How about the treatment you were given? Were you ever beaten?
Oh, everyone was beaten one time or another. You were mistreated and beat on every maybe 3 or 4 days. Sometimes a short time, sometimes real long. They hate you so much that people here can't realize. That's all they teach you people is to hate Americans. I'm speaking for TRAIN Committee, which means to restore American independence now. Let's try to get our country to stop aiding and trading with communist nations, which makes sense because we're giving supplies to these European communists and other places, and they're sending weapons to kill our men in Vietnam, so we're actually aiding them to do it. So it just makes sense to stop aiding with communists. And this is one way to get involved.
Lee, are you satisfied that your commander and the American government did everything possible to prevent your capture and later to negotiate for your release?
I'm not satisfied, and none of the crew are, with the prevention of our capture, and I'm sure the American people aren't either, because our government told us that they would send aid if we needed it off of Vietnam, off of North Korea. They told us that if we were captured for some reason, that they would retaliate within 24 hours. And they had been warned by the communists before we left port that the communists would sink any spy ship, as they called us, off their coast.
Surely. Lee, why did you not receive help? What were some of the reasons?
Well, there was many. One, they said that the aircraft weren't available. Another said that they were nuclear armed. They couldn't change them over. Even another one said that aircraft came from Okinawa, but it was dark by the time they got there. They turned back. And the last one was that the military didn't have the authority to send anyone. It had to come from the president, who should have had the message from my ship within 15 minutes. And that the presidential aide was afraid to wake him during the night.
Do you believe any of them?
No.
Lee, is there anything, no matter how small, that hasn't been brought to the attention of the American public? Something that they should know about?
Yes, one thing, it came out of court inquiry, but it seems most people don't know it, is that the communist North Koreans had said that they would sink any spy ship, as they called us, off their coast. And this is a week or two before the ship left port. And this is why we expected help, which they had promised to us if we needed it. Now, this is one thing I think people should remember, because they knew, and they had warned us that we were coming, and what they would do to us.
And there had been another ship in the area prior to yours?
On the other coast.
Yeah.
And they'd arrested it. But after that ship went back, then they came out and said that they would sink any spy ship, as they called us, off their coast. And our people knew this, but they thought that it would just be more harassment.